Thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Steve said I'm not going to do a speech, we can have an interview, so that's what we're doing.
You've been spared.
I want to admit that I made the unfortunate mistake of picking up Steve Brill's book at 11 p.m. on vacation, and the next thing I knew it was 6 a.m. in the morning, and I have a 4-year-old son, and thank you for that. I promise you it's a page turner, and we are really thrilled to be able to provide it for everyone here. I encourage you to pick it up. If you've already read it, take it and give it to somebody else that you think needs to read it. So, for those of you that haven't had a chance to hear about this book, I want to tell you that I think it's a very important book. I think it gives a real insider's view on the ed reform agenda, and more importantly, it puts forth a surprising direction for next steps for ed reform. And it really, really spoke to me, and it really influenced the course of our organization and how we started to view our work. So I'm going to start with just a few questions, some issues.
Sure.
So tell me just what motivated you to write this book?
I was curious about how a system could be so dysfunctional while spending so much money. And I had, we outspend every other country per capita in education, and we underachieve most of the developed countries. And then I read some little tiny article in the New York Post about these places where they send teachers who are so incompetent or they've been accused of crimes that the chancellor, then Chancellor Joe Klein, didn't want them in classrooms. And this was called the Rubber Room, and I was sort of looking for a magazine idea, and I said, well, that can't be true. That's the New York Post. And I did a little investigating, and I called some people, including Joel Klein, and I went to New York and said, this seems like a good story. And I showed up at one of the Rubber Rooms, and one of the major things I teach the students for whom I teach a journalism seminar is, the first rule of good journalism is basically just to show up. It's a lot of work just to show up. And there were these people in this Rubber Room in Brooklyn, which is this nondescript, windowless building. One woman could go to a beach chair, the others were playing cards, and what was just too good, and you could not make this up, there was a mission statement on the wall, as I recall, believe in yourself. So now, God knows not all teachers are like this, and not even many teachers are like this. This is the 1% of the 1%, but it was emblematic of the system. And I like to write about big institutions and systems. I spend a lot of my time writing about legal institutions. And I was just really curious about why this system doesn't work, even when we pour so much money and so much effort into it. I mean, just step back and think about something. Why on earth would an organization, a fabulous organization like this, think it needs to name itself Teaching Matters? I mean, isn't it obvious that teaching matters? The answer is, as I found out, is that for many years, many of the leaders of the teachers' unions thought that other things mattered when it came to children's education. And these things do matter, like poverty, the family, etc. But that in terms of improving the lives of those kids, teaching actually didn't matter. And therefore, don't hold teachers accountable. And people like the Eva Moskowitzes of the world have proven them wrong.
So how did you go from the Rubber Rooms to ed reform?
Well, I then sort of got interested in the subject, and then there was this thing I didn't quite understand called race to the top coming down. And one of the tensions in race to the top was that the Obama administration, much to the consternation of more traditional Democrats, was conditioning all this federal aid to states on whether they would enact this laundry list of every education reformer's favorite reforms. And so states like New York had a choice of do we do the reforms and get the money, or do we ignore the reforms and forget the money? In the first round, New York decided, let's forget about the reforms. In the second round, New York came up with a much better solution. It passed fake reform in legislation and got the money, and now they're not delivering on the reforms. And anyone who read the legislation would know they can't deliver on the reforms.
So Tommy, you said that the ed reform, and I have to say that having worked in education, I still was amazed in which worked in education, knew many of the people in the book. I still learned so much about the intricacies. I think everyone that read the book started to connect the dots and see some of the ways in which their work was connected. But you say that sort of ed reform as a powerful movement is still the first mile, and that it's a marathon. And I really like it. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is the race? What's at the end?
Well, what I discovered, and some people were shocked to see that I even suggested at the end that Randy Weingarten would be put in charge of the whole kit and caboodle here. And I actually think that's not a completely stupid idea. But what I realized was that, it was Dave Levin from KIT. Did you say he was here, or did you just mention his name?
No, he's not here.
It was Dave Levin who sort of put me onto this, and then the experience I had following some of the leaders in Harlem Success that sort of confirmed this for me. Is that it's one thing to cite, and it's very important to cite the work of, the charter schools and the fabulous public schools, as you said, that are run by exceptional leaders with exceptional teachers. But there are 3.2 million K-12 teachers in the United States. You are not going to fill their ranks with people, walking out of Yale, Harvard, and Princeton who want to be on the TFA for 2 years, or even people like my son who want to be there even longer.
Your son is now working in a charter school.
Yeah, he works in a charter school. You can't do that. You have to fix the system in a way that I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but that allows average teachers with average motivation to be much better and to want to be much better at what they do. And I think the way to do that is to find pockets of leaders within teaching organizations, in particular the union, where you can harness that. And in Hillsborough County, Florida, they're doing that. To some degree, Randy is. To no degree, Mike Mulgrew is.
That's Brill issues. I know that in my own board, this issue of, to work with the unions, they really wanted very specific examples of where you had seen that and to what effect, what outcomes.
Well, if you can, let's talk about teacher evaluations. I think a lot of the debate about that is kind of overdone, as we were saying at the table. Why would you have the largest workplace other than retail sales firms in the country, which is the K-12 workplace, be the only workplace where you don't evaluate people, promote them, motivate them, pay them based on the quality of their performance, because somebody's made a decision you can't evaluate people perfectly. We're liable to be unfair to some people, and therefore let's just not do it at all. Now, the way to get that done in a way that there is perceived fairness and people don't want to quit and want to be motivated is obviously to involve the people who are being evaluated. In all the reporting I did, I never met a fourth grade teacher in any classroom in the United States who couldn't tell me probably really accurately who the best and worst teacher in the third grade was. So why are we so hung up on whether it's 42% or 48% of test scores and there have to be 9 evaluation sessions instead of 7? Just go try it and figure it out. It's going to be unfair to some people, and you know what? Every workplace all of us have worked in has been unfair either to us or some of our colleagues when they've been evaluated. We don't just say, well, therefore let's just not do it.
So I would like to open this up to questions. I'm going to ask one more, and then if you do have a question, just go ahead and raise your hand. The mission of my organization obviously is to work with teachers, but can you give advice? There are other actors in this room that are working inside the system. I call it reform from within. What advice, and we're not necessarily always interfacing with unions, but what advice, although we could be, what advice would you give for organizations like us who are working from the inside?
Do more of it, and you have to balance the need to get along with the need to push back. I find, for example, that many organizations, even some charter organizations, don't use the press very well. They allow the anti-reform elements, particularly the unions, except for the New York Post, to dominate or get the better of the debate very often. And I think that that's one piece of advice. And the second piece of advice is support the organizations that work, like yours, like the charter organizations that are acknowledged to be doing really successful work. There's so much work to be done. It's not like if you have time or resources, you're going to be hard pressed to figure out where to put it.
That is true. So I'd like to open this up. Gentleman in the back there, yeah, Joe.
So my question is, my name is Bill Lewis. I sit on the board of Teaching Matters. Oh, Mike, I don't need this. So now I'll lower my voice. The fact that the demographics of New York City, I believe, is that the population here is 44% white, and the New York City public school system is only about 15% white. Is there a set of fixes, solutions that you think that unions will agree to, politicians will agree to, that will resegregate the New York City public schools?
They'll reintegrate.
Reintegrate, that's the word.
I was hoping you meant that.
Exactly.
Well, one of the things I would point to, and this is going to sound like I'm not answering the question, but I actually am. If you look at where Eva Moskowitz has started opening charter schools, what she is proving by opening those very successful charter schools on the Upper West Side and in relatively middle-income areas of Brooklyn is that if you have quality, successful schools in New York City, and don't forget, the charter schools and public schools, the only difference is they get less money from the government than the public schools. They also don't waste any money. But if you look at that model of, if we have a really successful school, you won't see the kind of flight to the suburbs. Just look at what happens on the Upper West Side. I can guarantee you the Upper West Side success is as good as probably any private school in Manhattan, including the ones that our kids went to. And they're slightly less expensive. And you wouldn't have to move to the Mamaroneck or someplace in New Jersey if you can get that choice. So the challenge of the public school system is to follow that model, and the challenge of the government is to allow for the expansion of the successful charter schools that are doing that. And the fear I have is that we haven't talked about, it's the big elephant in this room, is that whatever you think about education reform, however we might quibble at the edges, the mayoral race a year from now is going to determine whether we go backwards or forwards. And so far, every candidate out there wants us to go backwards.
Are there any other questions?
What role do independent schools, private schools in New York City should play in the reform debate? I think there's probably many people who send their children to private schools in this room, and much of the professional development is going on at those schools. What role should those leaders, those educators, play in this conversation?
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it. Obviously, the really good independent schools that I'm aware of, and at least going back 5 to 10 years, I'm aware of a lot of them, is that they do strive to provide the kind of aid that gives them at least a partially diverse student body. But I will tell you, the really good charter schools that I've seen, I mean, there was once a situation where I was having breakfast with one of the charter school leaders, and the charter school leader's principal came by and said hello to us, And the principal then said she was off to visit one of the best-known Upper East Side private schools in Manhattan. I said, well, what are you doing that for? She said, well, we want to try to learn from them. And I said, well, you should have them come visit you. I mean, there is some exciting, and remember, it's so much harder to teach in situations where not all the kids are necessarily motivated to learn, and they're coming from difficult homes. It is, all teachers have an incredibly hard job. I should say that's the first thing I learned doing this book. I mean, it is really hard stuff to do it right. And I've taught for 11 years at Yale on a seminar with 15 kids who apply to get in, hundreds of them all motivated. And then I started reading some of the books about how to teach, and I was doing nothing that you were supposed to do to teach. And these kids thought I was terrific because they all got good grades, and obviously I have great judgment if I give them good grades. And so, I mean, real teaching is really, really hard.
I'd like to add on to that briefly in the sense that I went to a number of schools, one of them being Bronxville, and every single one of my teachers had cut their teeth on Bronx kids learning how to teach, and then I got the benefit of that instruction in Bronxville. So that is part of the challenge we have now, and it is public schools are where teachers really can learn the craft in a way that you almost can't have that opportunity sometimes in a private school or in a suburban school. So don't underestimate the amazing talent and the speed at which people get their game going in the public schools.
It's actually an interesting thought. I mean, if you thought taking a really successful teacher from a public school here in New York in a really an underserved neighborhood or a charter school, and you drop them into an independent center, they would just take over the place.
They're a little shell-shocked, actually. So, anyway, Steve, I want to thank you. If I have one more question?
So I had my hand up from the beginning. This is a tough question in this room, but I'd like to hear your evaluation of what you would advise the governor to do to improve teaching in the non-charter public schools to accomplish what you want to see accomplished.
Well, with all due respect to the governor, I think he failed to bite the bullet the last time around. And again, I have expressed some lack of confidence in what's going to come from it. I do know one thing for sure: nothing is going to happen in terms of evaluating teachers in New York City until there's a mayoral election. No matter what the deadlines say, no matter what anybody says, nada. Nothing's going to happen because Mr. Mulgrew clearly has, the only interest he has is in signing no contract, because until no contract is signed, the current contract stays in effect. Teachers still get their annual raises every year based on how long they've been breathing, so they're okay. And there is no reason for anyone on the union side to do anything until the election is resolved.
I'd like to, I don't know, is Josh Moss still here?
Yeah.
He's left, okay. He's one of the chief academic officers. We were talking at the table, and his comment was, you're going to hear a lot of yelling and screaming through January, but that they do believe that everybody, because of money, because the school system is so broke, that there will be probably a deal in the end. Maybe you know something I don't know.
If the governor bites the bullet and holds the money back.
Which they feel that he very well might, but at least he's made enough there. And thanks, Governor, for playing hardball, because the city needs it. So with that, I'm going to, I think we're going to wrap up the questions. Steve, thank you so much.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you for keeping me up all night. I hope you all have fun. I just want to take one last minute to thank everybody for coming today. I really appreciate the fact that you come out for this. It means so much to us. It makes our work possible. And I want to take a moment to thank Liz Roden and also Bodas, my amazing chairwoman, who is right there. Thank you. And also the staff and teaching managers, who are incredible. So thank you.